Buy raw or buy slabs? Sell raw or sell slabs? Let's break it down on this video from Bronzeville Comics. Hey there, panelologists. This is Jim from Bronzeville Comics coming to you with another video. Before we get started, like, comment, subscribe. We've just reached 4,500 subscribers and we're pushing towards 5,000. If you enjoy the content, give us a thumbs up, leave a comment. It's appreciated, helps the algorithm. In addition, follow us on the other socials. We're on Instagram at Bronzeville_comics. Also, Whatnot, Bronzeville_comics. If you've not yet tried Whatnot and you'd like to, there is a link in the description of this video that will get you $10 off your first purchase, regardless of who that is with, me or another vendor. Also, in the description of this video is a link to my eBay store, as well as my email. And if you're interested in any kids toys, there's plenty of them on my eBay store. We're cleaning out the kids stuff, and that's kind of prevented me from really selling comics as much as I want to. Anyway, also have a lot of trade paperbacks that are on there and are going up, and books about comics that I don't sell on Whatnot. So if you're interested, check it out. So I went to Terrificon the other day, dropped a video about that, and I was talking to some vendors about what was selling, and there was a little bit of difference of opinion. And I guess it depends on inventory and what you specialize in, whether they were selling raw or selling slabs. Now, I was talking to Erod, and he said he was selling raw, and I said, there's a difference in the type of collector you are, right? Now, there are going to be people that are watching this that are no slabs ever. That's fine. If you don't believe in slabs, there are people that think it's a scam, whatever. That's a completely valid opinion, and I understand it. And I've gone over before, my thought process with it. There's two aspects to it. I resell comic books, right? I buy collections, I buy books, and I resell to fund other books. And we'll talk about that in the selling of slabs. So a lot of cases, there is a benefit to selling slabs. As a collector, I generally prefer to buy raw comic books, with an exception. So at Terrificon, I bought several dozen books, no slabs. Kind of the exception I make for slabs are books that I already have raw, or I have submitted to get graded, that I'm going to keep in the personal collection, and I want to upgrade. So, for instance, recently I bought an All-Star Western number 10, the first appearance of Jonah Hex, in a 5.5. I had a 4.0. That was an upgrade. I already had it raw. I read it raw. And why is it that I would take a personal collection book and slab it? Well, A, it has value. B, I've already read it. And I got to the point, and I have a pretty large collection. I got to the point in my collecting, when I was in my 20s, I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll reread some of the comics, and I'll read this run, and I'll read the new stuff. You run out of time. You don't have time to do all of that. I don't even have time to read the new stuff. Job, wife, kids, YouTube videos, all that sort of stuff takes away time from reading comic books. And I have other things that I'm interested in as hobbies. So it's difficult. And I realized that I wasn't going to reread these books. So there are digital options available. However, I still prefer, especially for silver and bronze, even copper, looking at the original books. But how many of them am I going to reread? In some cases, I'll keep a reader copy, a lower grade copy, just to have. And there is that experience, that tactile experience. It involves all the senses, right? Well, not all of them. You don't really taste it, but you can feel the book. You smell the book. And obviously you read the book. So it involves three senses. So there is something there that you don't get when you do it digitally. And also you don't, even in a collected edition, an omnibus, a masterworks, a trade paperback, You don't get the book as it was originally published with ads and bullpen bulletins and letters pages, which were part of the experience at the time. And even more so for older books that I didn't experience the first time around. Earlier Silver Age books. I mean, I started reading in the Bronze Age. Golden Age books. There is a different experience to it, and it is a part of popular culture. The ads that were in there, for Golden Age books, there are these little one-page humor strips. The text, which usually I can't plow through those. Those are not really great reading. But there's an entire experience to it that is of its time. That is a piece of history. So I completely understand wanting to keep it raw. And if you're a reader collector, that makes perfect sense. Okay. I got to the point in my collecting as I was going through reorganizing my collection, and I'm going through, and I remember specifically, I was going through the run of the 1980s Blue Beetle, right? When DC first acquired him, Ted Cord and Paris Cullen was doing the art. Going through those and knowing that I enjoyed reading the book when it came out at the time, but also knowing that I'm never going to have the time to reread all these books again. Okay. But I do get enjoyment of going through the entire run and seeing all the covers. And obviously a big part of slabbing is cover appeal with variants, etc., because that's the only part of the comic that you can still experience when it's slabbed. So I said, I'm not going to read these books again and again, right? The older books that I get slabbed, I tend to read them for the experience of having gone through them. And then if they're worth money, I'll get them slabbed. So as a buyer, though, I prefer raw books. Why do I prefer raw books? Because I can slab them myself. Now, you need to have a couple of things at your disposal to be able to do that. Number one is you need to know how to grade books, right? At least get a pretty good indication. You can't look at a book and think it's a 9.8 when it's really an 8.5. You have to, even a 9.2 to a 9.8 is a big difference, especially for a modern book. So if you're going to slab books on your own, you need to be able to grade. And to do that, I recommend looking up the YouTube channel. He's a retired YouTuber. He's not making new comic book content. ETA Nick. He had a whole series of grading videos that I found very helpful. I know other people in the community found very helpful. Very informative. There are other places you can go. CGC published a book on their grading standards. And ETA Nick, if you just search ETA Nick cheat sheet, he has a cheat sheet of common defects and how they limit the grades of books, the size of a tear or the size of a crease or the amount of staining on a cover or a pop staple detached centerfold, all those sorts of things. Give you a pretty good ballpark. You have to be patient. So especially if you're going to buy a more expensive book, let's say a book raw is $100 at a show, right? The one thing you have to do is you have to ask the seller to show you the book. I just came across a book. I got it as part of a collection, and I quickly flipped through to do the page count. It was Amazing Spider-Man 20. And it's probably like a 4-ish, right? 3.5 to 4.5, somewhere in that range. Worth several $100s. First appearance of the Scorpion. As I went to get it ready to clean and press it, there were 3 things clipped out of the interior of the book. There was a panel and 2 parts of ad pages that were clipped out. Fortunately, I didn't go and buy that book at fair market value. You have to check it. You have to do your page count. And you have to know your page count. Now, standard comic books from the Silver Age forward generally have 8 interior wraps. Right? So they're 34 pages, the cover plus 8 interior wraps. So what I do for most of those is you count from the back to the centerfold, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then from the centerfold to the front. That's just the way I go. And count that there's 8 on both sides. It's very common for a page to be missing. And that Amazing Spider-Man 20, it had this part, but it didn't have the rest. Usually there's a pinup on the last page of the book that is often removed. So you have to do your due diligence. And let me show you the book. So Now I'm at kind of a conundrum. I could submit this and get a qualified grade, or try to sell it raw. Okay? And I'm not sure what the value of the book is. So, the biggest defect on the book is that chipping up in the top corner by the Marvel box, right? Other than that, it's a pretty solid copy. You know, it has defects to it, certainly. And it's very common in this book, the very last page, for this pinup to have been torn out, right? Kid back in the mid-60s, oh, cool, a Spider-Man pinup, boom. They didn't think this was going to be worth, you know, $800 50, 60 years later. But what happened was, I don't even know what the books are. This ad page where Marvel would do 3 covers of books that were concurrently on sale, they clipped out one there and one there. And they're also very neatly clipped out, and it's the panel right by the right by the spine. So if you're just flipping through doing page count, it's easy to miss. Make sure everything's there. Make sure nothing is. Check the centerfold. Those sorts of things. So that is something that is important to do, to check your page count. I came across a Golden Age book this weekend, Hit Comics 25, Kid Eternity cover. I counted the pages, and it was, I think, 14 inner wraps. They were all there, and the spine, the centerfold was fine, solid. The staples were clean. I'm like, that doesn't make sense. And then I looked it up on Cover Price, and they do page counts. There are other, I think the Comic Database also does page counts. But I went to Cover Price real quick. It said 60 pages. So that means you divide 60 by 4 and you get 15. That means 14 inner wraps in the cover. The book was complete. So I did that check. I went to a show a few weeks ago. First, a guy had a book. I was interested in it. Something was clipped out of it. Right? So I avoided a problem there. You also want to be able to make sure, especially for Silver and even Bronze Age books and certainly Golden Age books, check for restoration. Right? That is not easy. I know some people that carry like black lights around with them at conventions. And if you're going to buy a big boy book, that's the way to go. So, when is raw better than graded? I think in general, especially for more modern books, let's say from the 80s forward, because there's very rarely restoration on those. I think it's better to have the book in hand, to be able to grab a book, right, and be able to look at it and see if it's incomplete. Now this, just like a book that's like $10, I usually will give it a quick once over just to see if it looks like it's in nice condition for the price that it is. But I get to see the book. It's easy to hide defects. And as you're getting to more expensive books, and make sure you ask the dealer first. Don't just start opening up his books. Right? That's, let them take the tape off, and you don't want to put a tape pull on a cover. And make sure whenever you're dealing with tape, get it away from the comic. And tape, Scotch versus painters, that's a whole other area of preference. I generally prefer Scotch tape, but if you're talking about Mylights and Mylars, painter's tape is the way to go. You never get Scotch tape off that stuff. So I prefer to get the book in hand because also I can clean and press it. I can. My grading is pretty decent. That's one tool that you need. The other tool that you need is being able to clean and press it. Either having somebody that'll do it for you or being able to do it yourself. Now, if you do have a presser, that's generally going to cost you money, right? So you have to figure that into the equation. And also, when you submit a book on your own, you are paying for the grading fees as well as shipping both ways. And you're also taking a little bit of a risk, because there is variability, even if you're a good grader, in what you think the grade is versus what CGC thinks the grade is, right? You have to be, in my opinion, a conservative grader. So more often than not, if you think it's a 5, that more often than not, it comes back as a 5.5 or a 6 rather than a 4.5 or a 4, right? You want to undergrade more often so that you're not spending money that the book isn't worth. Okay. And you also have to know whether you're buying raw or graded pricing. So you want to be able to grade, and you want to be able to have an avenue to clean and press, right? Now, understand that if you're collecting, getting a book graded costs money. So you have to factor that cost into your purchase of the book. Not every book you pick up is going to be a 9.8 for a modern book. And sometimes you're going to be wrong. You're going to, somebody will sell it as a 6.0 and it's a 4.5. And you're going to lose money there. But you have to make sure if you're going to do this, that you have an idea of how to grade, and are able to be conservative when you're submitting books, right? Now, why is it preferable to get a graded book? Number one, the grade is already determined by an independent third party. The reason that CGC was created in the first place is because if you go to a show, you buy a raw book, and you take a look at it, and the dealer has it graded as a very fine minus, and you think it's a fine, there's a difference there, right? And maybe there's some room for negotiation. You can point something out to the dealer. Maybe they'll be receptive to it and work with you, but maybe not. Maybe they are very firm, think that is a very fine minus, not a fine. So this takes that part of the negotiation or the haggling out of it. Somebody said, if CGC said it's a 9.4, we can both generally agree that it's a 9.4. Maybe you look at now you do want to look at the book, because sometimes CGC makes mistakes both ways. You can say, that doesn't look like a 9.4 to me. Probably just pass on it. At that point, it's probably not debating with the dealer, because they do know that somebody else might pay the 9.4 price for it. Might not be as circumspect in looking at the book as you are, right? If you're going to do your homework. So, and also if you're going to buy something online, there's information there. You have the book, its grade, its page quality. You also have the certification number, so you can look up grader's notes and get information on the book. So you're taking on less risk in the value of the book or the grade of the book affecting the value. Now that is completely separate from whether or not you prefer graded books. For me, now as a buyer, I like to buy raw books and get them graded, because there is a cost savings for me, even if I'm keeping it for my personal collection, right? I'm probably be able to pay less, and oftentimes I could take a book and improve the grade through cleaning and pressing and get a better book that way. Whereas if a book's slabbed, already cleaned and pressed, I can't take that skill that I have acquired to improve the book by cleaning and pressing. Usually, sometimes I do. It happens every once in a while. You do damage to a book. And increase the value of my collection that way. Of the value of the book that I have. Increase the inherent value, the appeal of that book. Even if I'm keeping it in my personal collection, never going to resell it. If I have a book that I bought at like a 7.5 and I can prove it to a 9, it is a better looking book. It's a more aesthetically pleasing book to me as a collector. Even if I don't get it graded. So But graded books are, in many ways, easier for me to sell, at least in terms of I don't have to worry about the buyer saying it isn't what you advertised. No, it's a 7.5 off-white to white pages. That's exactly what you knew you were getting. So it decreases some. It is a little bit more a pain in the neck to ship, I'll be honest. But there is certainly a market for graded books, and I don't have to then grade it myself. That takes a lot of time. It took me hours to go through the books I picked up at Terrificon and take them out of the bag, inspect them, count the pages, especially for older books. I generally don't count the pages for 80s books forward, which occasionally is a mistake. But I found a Batman Beyond #1. I'm like, oh, it was in a lot from eBay. I'm like, let me clean and press it. Oh, it's got a coupon to Great Adventure clipped out. That was disappointing. But there is value there to being able to apply those techniques. So for buying, know how to grade. If you're going to submit, have the ability to clean and press. Either yourself or somebody that does it professionally. Okay. One of the mistakes I made in terms of my own grading, I kind of missed, like when I first jumped back into collecting more aggressively when I started this channel. I sent a bunch of books to Erod to clean and press, right? I sent them the first batch of books, great results. Sent him a bigger batch of books, great results. And then I sent him a batch of modern books. And he came back to me, gave me the books back. He said, man, not all these are 9/8, right? And I think I was a little too inexperienced in terms of knowing how to grade. Now I do have a better eye at looking at books, whether or not they're 9/8 candidates. And that's, especially when you're dealing with modern books, that's an important thing to develop. Ultra-modern books, fresh off the rack, should be pretty close to 9/8. Marvel paper quality, another story. But books from the 80s, 90s, 2000s, even the 70s, if you can, find the ones that are largely defect-free, that have a potential for getting a 9/8, that can greatly improve the value of your collection. And here's the other aspect of it. You're not always going to have your collection. There's going to be a point in time where either you decide or the fates decide that you're no longer going to have your collection. Okay? It may go to your heirs, at which point it's going to be an awful lot easier for them and more lucrative for them to have graded books, especially for big keys, right? Because unless, your children get into the hobby with you and then learn the ins and outs of grading and pricing and etc., what are they going to do with those books? Maybe they're just going to find somebody that'll take them all. That's how collections come to resellers and dealers. If you want them to have the value in the collection, getting them graded is going to be, and even if at some point in time, you're going to retire and move away and get into a smaller living circumstance, these have value, right? The graded books have more liquidity to them in terms of value you can get. You could probably, if it's still raw, maybe it's a $20 book. If it's graded in 9.8, maybe it's a $150 book, right? So you have to calculate. Now, the other thing about grading is know what you're grading. Don't submit like some random book that comes back a 7.5 and is worth $20. Or even modern books that nobody wants, right? Cover Q of some random book that came out last month, and you got the 9.8, and nobody wants it, right? A lot of those books, even though their covers may be appealing, they may be by hot artists, the market isn't hungry for them, right? So you have to understand value as well. You don't want to be buying, let's say, paying $50 for a book that's only going to be worth $20. Right? If you're buying a book fresh off the stands, right? For whatever, it's 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, whatever it is now. And you're just going to read it and put it away. And it's like that disposable income. And maybe you'll be able to sell it for, on average, $1 or $2 down the road just to recoup some money. That's fine. But if you're going to chase books for their value, know what the value is and pay attention to the market. Avoid FOMO, right? I'll give you a perfect example is the Amazing Spider-Man 55. The Patrick Gleason webhead did a bunch of variants, second printings, third printings, different colors. Hugely popular. Everybody was jumping on it. The 9.8s were going for $150, $200. That book doesn't even sell anymore because everybody that wanted it has it. The difference is books, even from the 90s, some of them, 80s, 70s, 60s, etc. There are a lot more people that want that book than have that book, right? Because there aren't that many of them around, especially in better condition. Some people take a book that's in mid, even lower grade, a reader copy, plenty of those, but there are other people that are looking for their books to be in better condition. They just want a more eye-appealing book in their collection. So I hope this helps you out a little bit in terms of buying and selling. Again, slamming or not, that's totally up to you, but understand buying books, raw books. I prefer raw books because I know I can grade them, I can clean and press them, and if I submit them, and I buy plenty of raw books that just go into, the personal collection to fill runs, books that I'm going to read, etc. Plenty of that. But there are some books I hunt because I think I can return value on them. I have developed those skills of grading and cleaning and pressing. Understand also that you're not going to have your books for a little bit of time. That's another thing, right? And some people are nervous about sending them away and they'll get damaged and destroyed and swapped out. And I've never had any of those experiences. I've just had long delays in getting books back from CGC. So in the comments below, I'm starting to ramble a little bit, or maybe I've been rambling the whole time. I'm not sure. You can take a look at a couple of my other videos now. Let me know what you think in the comments about what we've been talking about. And this is Jim saying until next time, enjoy your comics.